morning, friends. The 9th of October, 2021. Today is the day when the military history strategy sessions at the Valley of Words are commencing. And we are going to be talking about the 1971 war, looking back and looking ahead, because this is the war which shaped the subcontinent. But before we start our conversations today, let me welcome you on behalf of the Board of Governors of Valley of Words. And this time, the format of the Valley of Words has changed. It's changed because of COVID, because in no one place can you have more than 100 people at any point of time because of social distancing and norms. But we have leveraged this to our advantage. So we're doing the Valley of Words in 5 different cities, and we are devoting a particular institution to a knowledge vertical. And the military history and strategy vertical is being done at the United Services Institution, India's foremost think tank on military and strategic matters. We are delighted that we had the support of the director of USI, General B.K. Sharma, a distinguished military historian, a distinguished military strategist, whose support has been crucial in shaping this together. Another point which I wanted to share with you is that this particular 2-day event has been curated by my very dear friend, Lt Gen PJS Pannu, whom I've had the privilege of knowing for the last 3 years. We got together at the LBS, National Academy of Administration, where we had come in as the Deputy Chief of Staff to talk to the joint civil military program on the new integrated defense policy of the country and what should India's defense be like. How does a nation go to war? So that's how the conversation started. And over the last 3 years, we've really learned a lot from each other. I hope it's mutual because I have certainly learned a lot from General Pannu. Last year, General Pannu was involved with us as a resource person, but this year he's joined the board of governors of the Valley of Words and is the head of the military history and strategy vertical. Thank you, General, for joining us, and tell us how you're going to take us through for the next 2 days.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I would say Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, you have been a great inspiration. Your personality itself, brings a lot of people together to talk about things which are otherwise serious in nature, but you make such a nice environment that people can freely think about and talk about very significant matters, not only which are national but also even international. To you to have invited me to join the Valley of Words. I, in particular, after my superannuation, have been looking at 1971 war as an event because we were drawing closer to this day where 50 years are going to be looked at, from a perspective that this war actually shaped the subcontinent 50 years back. So it is important to look back, but recently the events, or in last couple of years, the events have shaped up to a point that you start understanding the great game a little differently. One never looked at 1971 war, the Indo-Pakistan, the India-China affair, and also now the AFPAC region, the way it is unfolding and the number of international players which are there. I find that we earlier did not understand that India, Indian Kashmir, Western borders are completely impacted by the great game. But I think we understand it even more that we have been used as part of the great game without fully understanding the consequences of how the world was turning around. Go back 50 years, the Western world was against us. 50 years later today, the Western world is with us. At that time, the entire global, affiliations, how the groupings had happened were very complex in nature, and we were literally left alone. And our prime minister at that time did not get any support except from Russia. But today you find that there is a new player. Our northern borders are active with China becoming very belligerent. Pakistan has actually changed complexions over years. Pakistan has been a winner in many ways by tricking the whole world around it. And I think the world have understood Pakistan, that it is a deep customer, but they have not been able to deal with the deep customer as squarely they should deal with it. So as a result, to curate something at 50 years of this event, I think gives me a great joy. And I think the number of speakers that we have actually got together, bringing in for this, I think will bring a huge amount of understanding of the subcontinent, the geostrategic importance, the history of it, even the geography of it. So I suppose I'm really going to look forward to these speakers coming in, talking about their perspectives about this area, starting from the geography, the geopolitics of it, and of course, the history, how it has unfolded, and the future, how it is likely to pan out. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you. In fact, I share the same thoughts, because you got me to discuss along with Aarti Tikku Singh and Shipunal Verma about the salience of geography and about how geography itself played a very important role, and whether or not geography plays a role. But let me draw your attention to one of the to the article which came today in one of the leading papers, Christine Fair's article, and she's been in conversation with you. And she says that, it appears to the whole world that India won 1971 war, but she goes on to allude that perhaps we won the battle and we didn't win the war, because there have been so many battles that are going on, and within the larger overall strategic game, maybe we did not gain as much as we could have, both in terms of geography and in terms of strategy. So I would like you to talk to our viewers about both about the conversation with Fair, and also about her seminal article that she's written especially for the value of words.
Very interestingly, people discuss Pakistan, which everybody talks in a similar way. In some other place, Christine Fair one day was talking about that, you're looking at Pakistan being a failing state. She says the state never fails, it only survives. So it is not a failing state, it is a surviving state. And in one of the conversations I had with her, she says Pakistan purely got lucky. And I said, oh, then how did it produce a nuclear bomb? You don't produce a nuclear bomb out of being lucky. Then, she goes on to talk about Pakistan, how Pakistan has been involved in various groups and extracting favors from them, whether it is the Islamic group differently, with the Chinese differently, and the undercurrents with how it appears over the surface different, and then under the surface, Pakistan does things differently, including having gone and purchased a couple of think tanks and opinion makers in the United States who would lobby the case. So if they were to do all this, it is not pure luck. I suppose there's a strategy and success behind it. So if we have to deal with Pakistan as we have been dealing with Pakistan for the last 75 years, I think we need to understand Pakistan more than just being purely lucky. But I think we are going to do daily business with them, and they are doing daily business with our neighbors in the northern, front, who are actually enmassed troops on our borders. The Chinese are not only on our borders, but they are also getting into Pakistan and AFPAC region and looking for minerals. And I hope Pakistan is understood by China that it is a deeper customer than possibly they think like, or maybe they already know it and they'll deal with the deep customer differently. So Christine Fair actually brings in a lot of things in which she says Pakistan has been successful. And also what she says is that after the Pakistan got dismembered, Pakistan has only turned more stronger, because earlier it had a problem how to deal with Eastern Pakistan. Now that having gone, Pakistan now, Western Pakistan as earlier, now is more monolithic and can deal with things better, and it is only emerged stronger. So, these are the interesting things that she's spoken about, and she's again coming back in session 2. And we are going to be talking about how Western Pakistan designs unfolded in Eastern Pakistan. So it'll be interesting when Christine is back, we'll talk to her more.
No, it's very interesting because, this is, contrary to what most people thought, that Pakistan is a lost case, and that's also the argument which has been made. I mean, the point that Christine is making and you are making is that there is a method in the way Pakistan is operating, the way the deep state of Pakistan is operating. Now, tell me, General, I mean, Pakistan Army is unique in the sense that it has lost almost, in military terms, it seems to be losing every battle that it fights. in military terms. In purely military terms, it loses all the battles, and yet it continues to exercise an influence which is extraordinary, which is absolutely extraordinary. So how do you, as a military man, as a general, I mean, how do you react to this, that an army which fails again and again and again manages to take hold of the state, or manages to have such a deep, centrality, deep salience over the state? Is it because the army is strong, or is it because other institutions in Pakistan are so weak that they cannot pose any challenge to the deep state of Pakistan?
The uniqueness about Pakistan Army is that they squarely blamed the East Pakistan or Bengalis to have played that they took part of Pakistan away from them. They never say that Bengalis were challenging them and they could not stand up to the East Bengalis' demand. But they think that they were let down by the East Bengalis and they have now gone out. So 71 war is completely attributed to a failure within their own system, where one community is to be blamed. What is now left of Pakistan Army is basically Punjabi and Pashtun led. So you will realize that in one of the comments that Christine makes is that Pashtuns and Punjabis own the army, and army owns the nation. And the story of the Pakistan Army is, if you really internally ask them, and they would say to themselves that 47-48, they were victorious because they have actually been successful in capturing large swath of territory in Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan. They will never say it like this. Only they will say it from the victory point of view, but for them, it is unfinished agenda, because it's like saying we could have achieved much more and taken the entire Kashmir out of India. Then, as far as 1965 is concerned, India has reasons to talk about its victory of 1965. And very soon we are going to have a book release in which we are going to be actually talking about 1965 war by Shiv Kunal Verma, who's the author. And he would tell us that why Pakistan attacked us in 1965. And once they attacked us in 1965, we have reasons to tell to the world that how they did not succeed. But according to them, they were victorious in some parts, and that is the victory that they talk about. And similarly, in 1999, they say that we surprised India and we took actually large number of mountains in Kargil area. So they only talk about the victory up to the point they were victorious, and they do not ever talk about the ultimate result. And within their own community or within their own nation, they are selling Pakistan Army as the only macho entity that is keeping Pakistan away from a large Hindu empire, which is going to actually destroy it. And they are the saviors of Islam. That is how they are selling themselves. So Pakistan is very good in perception, internal and external. Internally, their perception is that they are the saviors of the nation, and externally, they are the ones who go and thumb tables in the United Nations Security Council and talk about the unfinished agenda. And Christine Fair also keeps talking about the unfinished agenda. So we will very nicely join 65 to 1971 war right at the beginning of our discussion.
Great, but we also have another book launch which is on 67 India-China War / battle. Would you like also to comment on the India-China War and on the role which China has in this region, in the entire subcontinent as such? Before you talk about China and the world, but let's talk about India, China, and Pakistan. So, could you throw some light on this book and on our discussions that our listeners might anticipate?
Those who have been reading and watching the recent history of Doklam or Dokala and Dolam, there are a couple of different expressions. When you talk about the recent skirmishes the Chinese had with the Indian troops in 2017, people understand that where is Doklam or Dolam, and these are the areas actually which are Chumbi Valley, and they rest on the IB boundary, which is on Sikkim Nathula. So this story of 1967 is actually at Nathula. And right from the very beginning, when you talk about 1971 war also, our then Army Chief General Sam Manekshaw was very clear about the Chinese could intervene from Chumbi Valley because they had shown certain hands in Chumbi Valley earlier, that is in 1967, and they were given, a rap on the knuckles, or they were actually bled and taught a lesson, which the Chinese refused to talk about because that happened after 1962, and they don't talk about it. But 1967 is where they learned that they cannot, get into the Indian territory without being beaten up like this. So one of the reasons that the Chinese ultimately did not come in 1971 war was that there was a history of 1967 that they were beaten in Nathula area. So therefore they could not threaten us in Chumbi Valley, as also the winters prevented their force buildup in that area. So in 1971, when Sam Manekshaw had designs on East Pakistan and how he would go, and you look at how East Pakistan's boundary is, Chumbi Valley and East Pakistan have a very narrow corridor, Siliguri corridor, and that is what separates the Indian, mainland, if I choose to call it like this, and the eastern sector through a very thin chicken's neck equivalent. So this is the area where in 1971 they were very concerned that the Chinese would come, and Chinese did not come because there is a history of 1967. So this book launch is also going to be extremely important to bring in the importance of Siliguri corridor and the Chinese designs there and how they were prevented in coming in. So it makes a good linkage to the whole story.
No, basically that, as a nation, we have to look back at our military history, and we must be able to present the factual details, the empirical evidence, the geography on the ground, the terrain on which battles have been fought, our successes, our failures. And this is something which somehow or the other did not get the attention it deserved. And it's only of late, the last 5 or 10 years, there has been a surge of historical writing on the subject. And I certainly feel that, the value of words also contributed in devoting a vertical to look at military history and strategy, because this is really one area which got lost. I mean, it's not being taught in universities, it's not being taught in literature, it's not being taught in geography, it's not being taught in history. So there was a little niche which I think was getting neglected, and I'm glad that we have new authors who are writing about this, or writing about various wars, or writing about all these things, and that also brings us to the recent book which General Cardozo had written, and which you had launched with us at the Value of Words. Probably tell us about and talk about General Cardozo's book, also about Marigold as the Flower of Remembrance, and then we link it to your great effort at celebrating or acknowledging how Bollywood has integrated the wars into celluloid and brought wars into the thing. But first, let's talk about General Cardozo's book and about Marigold being the flower of remembrance for the fallen soldier. Or let me say, for the brave soldier.
General Cardo is really marvelous. He's a historian. He has written this book on 1971 war as a novelist. Reading that book, you don't realize that you are reading anything. It's effortless read, yet you feel that you're actually visiting along with him. And there are various sets on the stage which are unfolding. He sometimes talks about the Navy. Yeah. Sometimes he talks about what is happening in the headquarters in Calcutta. And then he goes on to how the aerial operations have happened, and in which, he was heli-lifted, and he calls it the first ever heli-lift operations in the subcontinent. And then, he starts again going on to certain naval operations in the Arabian Sea, and of course, many actions on the Western Front. So actually, his book is anecdotal and also strategic in nature. So he's a person who wants to understand the strategy, understands it. A person who wants to read the personalities of people involved, he can actually pick out on those personalities. And he himself then has gone into explaining in great details of how the Gurkhas and the BBC's role was. I'm very glad that we getting Mark Telly from the BBC also speak to us, because at that time, BBC was considered as the most credible information source. Even the military would take a decision on it. And Mark Telly would tell us that why the credibility of the BBC was so high, that when the BBC reported that at Sylhet, it is a brigade or even more than a brigade, Pakistan had to believe it. Why it was built up to a brigade was a matter of the understanding of the BBC. But I think otherwise the Pakistanis would have attacked. And then he keeps talking about what was happening inside Bangladesh. And, yet there is another book written by V.K. God. He talks about You Janma Bangladesh. Now, there's a great insight that it is not only the military operation which unfolded on the western borders and mainly on the eastern, sector, where all three fronts, including, the eastern, northern, and the western front, and in addition, the naval front, all were activated, and the Air Force went in from different directions. But actually, what was going inside, which has not ever come out, is the Mukti Bahini operations. There are a number of army officers who were involved in it. They have not been able to tell the story because officially it was not written in a manner as it can get written. The MOD has now commissioned a team which would actually come out with the story of 1971. And all those people may be already working to interview. In fact, I'm very glad that MOD is making an outreach to those from where they can get these evidences. So we are having a very good discussion in which I think you are also involved, that, Shri V.K. Gaud, who served the BSF, Lieutenant Colonel B.B. Singh, who actually, right from the time the military crossed the borders or before that, he was handed over to Mukti Bahini as, one of theirs. And he only came back to the battalion after the operation was over. And of course, then we will go on to drawing the military lessons of 1971 war. When you are victorious, you don't draw lessons. You only celebrate. But I think it's very important for us to draw lessons. Certain things, successes, we must know how they came in and how we could have done better. And even failures, if there were, on both sides, I think should be taken note of. Successes sometimes make you overlook certain failures and certain glitches. Yeah, and I think we have to look at that also, how we can build a future which brings us more successes rather than more experiences that we have to learn. So similarly, we will have the Air Force and the Navy come up with their perspective. So it will be an interesting mix of all this.
Yes, and I think we also have a veteran from Bangladesh. We have Colonel Sajad, who's one of the most decorated officers of Bangladesh. He's coming over. And so tell us about Colonel Sajad and about what he's going to be speaking, or what he's like. I mean, we don't know what he's going to be speaking, but you've had conversations with him. You've also had conversations with the High Commissioner there. You've had conversations with Bangladeshi diplomats. How does Bangladesh look at 1971? And how does this generation of, how does the new Bangladeshi who was born after 1971, who has no memories of having lived no memories of having lived ever under Pakistan, do you share some thoughts on Bangladesh, on what Bangladesh thinks about this war?
In fact, I would start with Christine Fair, and she says, I want to give great credit to the Indian Army that it went in, created a new nation, and just walked out of it, did not take advantage of it, did not even look back, and did not dictate terms as to how the new nation should manage their affairs. Having said that, the new nation as Bangladesh actually went through lots of ups and downs. Their leader, who was a freedom fighter, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he did not live longer. There's something went terribly wrong inside. And then the Pakistan factor again came back. The ISI building, various cells there, how the entire dispensation started playing into the hands of Islam, which became politics and then became the ISI's handle into spoiling the relationship between India and Bangladesh, and how it is cyclic, that one dispensation is more favorable to India and one dispensation is not. So it will be really of great interest when I spoke had a conversation through emails actually with the High Commissioner. They reached out to Lieutenant Colonel Qazi Sajad Ali Zahir Bir Protik. That's his name. So we, just call him Colonel Sajad. He is Swadhinta Padak That is the highest, one of the highest decorations in Bangladesh. And India has also decorated him with Padmashree. Now he's coming here and he's going to be live in front of people. He has a death warrant by the Western Pakistan on him, which is still in vogue. It has not. They have not actually taken it out, and they're still looking around to catch Colonel Sajad wherever they can find him, because he's on that death warrant. He was an active officer of the Pakistan Army. He was a parachute regiment officer who was very good at specialized missions. But when he realized that it's Bengalis who are actually going to be butchered and killed, he not only wanted to save himself, which is secondary to him, but I think he wanted to go back and save his nation, where the families and his own mother and his own family was under great threat. He will come and not only talk about what happened in Pakistan Army at that time, because he was a serving Pakistan Army officer, but what happened when he came down and became part and parcel of certain operations in India in 1971 war, and then what happened to Bangladesh in last 50 years. That is a story that he tells through his tears. I will not be able to narrate any of this. Only Colonel Sajad will be able to mention, and he's going to be, he's here with us. He would be talking to people, and he's going to be living here in USI. You can't really, he won't stop telling you stories. To cover 50 years, not going to be very easy.
In fact, it's a rare honor for us to have a Padmashree with us in our sessions, and to have a military officer being decorated with a Padmashree. Not many officers, I'm not aware of Padmashree or Padma awards being conferred upon military officers, especially military officers of another nation. So that speaks volumes about both about India-Bangladesh friendship, and also about how the two nations and the two armies and Mukti Bahani and BSF have all gone together. Somewhere along the line, General, we lost that trail about the marigold. I mean, the flower which General Cardozo has been trying to promote as the flower to remember the Indian soldier, and also about how Border and various other films have shaped the imagination of the youth of the country, insofar as the frontiers of the country are concerned, insofar as the defense of borders is concerned, because this is really a new dimension which you got to wow. I mean, we were keeping, as what should one say, a safe distance from Bollywood. But you made us feel, you made us realize that, look, Bollywood is very much a part of our psyche. Bollywood affects us, and in fact, it's one of those occasions where Bollywood has drawn from real life and brought it into real life, and the real life, in fact, has again impacted on real life. So something about marigold, something about JP Datta Sahab, something about Border.
Speaking to General Cardozo is an experience and a privilege. In the USI, of which I have been an associate in my official capacity also, and I am, a distinguished fellow. He has been talking about marigold as against how internationally, lily has been used to honor the martyrs, because he feels that Indian martyrs are special, they are different, and they have to be honored with the Indian flower and not with something which is from elsewhere. So he brought in this marigold as a flower of remembrance to honor the martyrs, which has found acceptability. As a result, when you look at various books being written and history being written, our history has been documented, but it is still lying in loose sheets in various archives here and there, which is being collected now. We did not even have a war memorial, and I'm very glad that before I superannuated, I was the chairman of the National War Memorial, and then we built it. Once we built it, I realized the importance of history, because the names are written of every martyr. At that time, it was close to 27,000 plus names, which you realize that after we became independent, so many troops have actually laid down their lives for the motherland. We only spoke about India Gate, which is of First World War. We don't have any monument for the Second World War. But after we became independent, now we have this monument. To go and pay respects there and to lay a wreath with marigold has actually become a custom. As also you look at today is information age. You can be victorious, you can be unknown. The soldier can be unknown, but why should he be unknown? So I think what happened, the current dispensation, the Prime Minister's vision was this, that why unknown soldier? Uh, Inverted rifle and a helmet on top, what does it signify? It means some people have laid down their lives, go and salute them because we haven't written the name, so we will generally give them, our honor. But I think what the Prime Minister Narendra Modi did was extremely good. He says, no, we have to recognize each one of them. So every name, and my team had to do a great diligence to make sure that no wrong name is written and no right name is missed out. And now we go and lay the wreath there with names, so there are no more unknown soldiers, there are known martyrs, where we honor them with marigold. Similarly, when you are looking at the perception, I think as unknown, there's no perception, but the perception is only of known. And I think Bollywood, not only Bollywood, anybody who makes a war movie or any war story which is televised or brought on a big screen or silver screen acts as a great force multiplier in nation building. And I think patriotism is not to talk about. Patriotism is to feel. And I think many people came to cinema halls when they saw Border and then LOC. The music, it actually turned people around upside down. And many youngsters joined the military, seeing the movie called Border, which was made on 1971 war. But it was made just about over 20 years back. So people did not understand 71 war till the time they saw Border. And I think it merits a special recognition that Border is the one which created a new wave, and also the awareness of what 1971 war, which is unparalleled in military history elsewhere. I mean, you don't take 93,000 prisoners just like that, and then you be magnanimous about it. Whatever you say, the martyrs, the contribution of the military, bringing military to the drawing rooms and the hearts of people at large, I think has been a great contribution. So therefore, I think it is the celluloid and the cinema and the media all put together. And the high point is Border changed the complexion, where the youngsters are thoroughly motivated. And after that, many people who fought Kargil were motivated by seeing such movies. And I think many more are walking in. More such movies are made. I think there will be more people who would understand that our country deserves such great men of honor to defend it. Otherwise, people don't get this. So I think it's a great movement. He may not have fought the war himself, but I think greatly he contributes to the success of military. So I suppose JP Datta Sahab deserves that honor. And therefore, getting him to honor a martyr, which he does in a special way, I think he is also a great ambassador of Marigold. So that is what I can say about Datta Sahab's contribution, not only to Bollywood, but also to nation building and building the spirit of the nation.
Great. You talked about Datta Sahab being an ambassador, which brings us to the role which ambassadors play, with the diplomatic corps plays in the success of a nation, in the success of negotiations, in the success of building an international perception. So we have a session on diplomacy, statecraft, and about perception. Can you share some light on the foreign service people who are coming to us in these sessions, and about specifically about how the diplomatic corps has been able to give India the new identity that it deserves? Recently, India had the Security Council as well. So your thoughts on how the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the IAS, the IPS, the Foreign Service, the Forest Service, the Economic Services, how all of us have to work together. You could also reflect on your experiences at the Joint Civil Military Program that we've been conducting. So your thoughts on this?
Our Foreign Service actually has a great contribution because they are the face of a nation abroad. We loosely call them ambassadors when we talk about who brands the country. But here, these ambassadors, as they actually, the title comes from this, that actually they brand the country, and they are real ambassadors who bring in not only the perception of a country, but I think they are great negotiators. You don't have to fight war unless you lose it on the table. And once you're losing a war on the table, or you decide to pick up a war on the table, you have to convert that into success. So I suppose diplomats have had a great contribution that even when we went to war, they could indicate ahead of time that on tables, such discussions are not yielding much result and we have to go to war. And they are the ones who are the early indicators for us to prepare for war. These embassies are actually indicators how India is being looked at from outside. And if India needs to protect its own interests, not only as far as the borders and security is concerned, even commercially, trade-wise, or even to win negotiations in any field, I think they are the ones who bring back a communication, how the new India should shape up. And I think the global image of India and the responses is something that we are actually discussing in session 6. And we are also not only putting the diplomacy as diplomacy, but I think perceptions and media at some point come together. You know, what a diplomat is saying, a young lady representing a country, thumping the table and speaking in clear language with so much of confidence, knows that there is a strong nation standing behind her or him. Unless you have a strong military, unless you have strong muscle behind, unless you know that if you go to war, you're going to succeed, I don't think so our diplomats will be able to thumb the table and put strong points across and win these discussions in these high tables. They won't even get admission in the high tables, actually. So you have to be a military power to get admission of the high table. Once you are in the high table, then you know that there is a visible military muscle available to them, and they can bank upon it should they feel that India needs to do business differently. So I think military becomes an extension of diplomacy, and I think that is the connection that we are trying to bring here in session 6.
Yeah, great. So I think what is coming out is that, you don't look at anything in silos. We cannot look at anything in silos. There's no such thing as, as defending a border. That it's not just the BSF, it's not just the local administration, it is the whole nation. And you've been talking about the nation going to war or the nation defending itself, that security is not just the security on the frontier, but security is an all-encompassing thing. And which also brings me to two other media personalities that we're going to have with us, Maruf Raza and Iqbal Malhotra. Both of them have been sterling individuals in their own right. And what's going to be their role? What are they going to be talking about? And what are their sessions, so that our viewers be excited to join those conversations as well?
I know Maruf Raza is a close-mate of mine. And he always had a gift of gab and a junoon. I don't have a parallel of that. I would not call him, a guy who's spirited, and he actually has in him and all that. So he has that junoon. So with his passion about military and the background that he comes from, and he also comes from a military family, he's taken on a role is also to bring to the drawing rooms of how the valor can be understood and has to be understood, because he has also been in situations and he knows that how frustrating it can be that you have fought a war and you have been on a border area and you come back, you don't even know how to tell the story because people won't know how to understand it unless a film is made. So he runs a magazine called Salute. And similarly, Iqbal Malhotra runs a company which makes war movies. So these two gentlemen have done a lot of warfare, statecraft, and all put together. And I think they have an insight of how the military generalship and leadership worked towards winning very, very, trying circumstances and bring warfare in a manner that actually warfare is very, very complex subject. At that time, when you're sitting in the ops room, you realize that you have no idea where it is headed and you're taking decisions. Those decisions are gutsy. And many people say that you have to be a lucky general to win a war, but it's not so easy to be lucky unless you win it. And you have to only win it if the punch is there. As they say, relationship can be a factor of chemistry. Maneuver is a factor of physics. And physics is not by chance. Physics is you put the metal where it needs to be put. And there is time and space for it. I think these two gentlemen, Iqbal Malhotra and Maruf Raza, have understood how the metals were brought and how to maneuver warfare. And they both understand geography very well. They both understand history very well. And I think they will do a great job in connecting the veterans who actually fought, how they see the perceptions and how the cinema came into it, how they write books. Both of them are authors, and both of them make movies. So I think it will be a great conversation having Iqbal and Maruf both in the panels.
So great talking to you, General Pannu, and let me assure our viewers that you're going to have 2 days of very intense discussions which are going to throw light at the end of the tunnel, which are going to be very seminal, which are going to bring in many perspectives, and which will also try to give you an idea of what it was be in and around that time, the time period of 1971, what all went into that war, what was the political system at that time, how the political system was totally in sync with all the chiefs. I mean, the chief of the army, the chief of the navy, and the chief of the air force. I mean, normally you don't find such a good chemistry. So it was that wonderful chemistry between the political leadership, between the bureaucratic elite, between the army generals, I mean, and between the All India Radio, between the media, between the press. I mean, the whole nation was together at that point of time. Over the last 50 years, we've seen many vicissitudes in our country. All countries pass through these phases. There are phases of great joy. There are times when nations do face a little dip, because that's part of history. But it's very important for all of us to understand history. We may not be able to change history, but we must understand why things happen. And we ought to be able to give due recognition and due credit to all those who contributed with their blood, sweat, and tears to the cause of this nation. And with this, let me in strategy sessions. And from this moment onwards, you'll be getting a telecast of all the sessions that have been held so far. Thank you very much. Thank you, General Pannu. Thank you, Team Moody Lens, for bringing us all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jai Hind.